So we're going to talk about actually processing payroll within QuickBooks. And I, as well as the QuickBooks people, strongly recommend that if you're going to do this yourself, your own payroll, that you actually spend the money and pay for one of the subscriptions. Yes, it can be a little pricey. However, it's really the odds of making a mistake doing this manually are so high. And you're really talking about somebody else's pay that you're messing with. And you wouldn't want your boss to come to you and say that they had screwed up your payroll all year long and now you owe taxes at the end of the year because they failed to properly withhold. That would be an unfortunate conversation to have. And frankly, that actually happened to my husband. The company that he was working for failed to indicate that he was subject to Vermont income tax, despite the fact that it was a Vermont company and he was working in Vermont. Somebody just didn't click the right box, and they didn't withhold, and he didn't notice, unfortunately. And it wasn't probably until halfway through the year that it was discovered. And so we ended up having to make an estimated tax payment so that we wouldn't be penalized at the end of the year for underpayment of state income tax. So it happens, and one of the hazards of doing these yourself. So there's multiple ways that you can enter payroll. You can kind of do a batch situation where you've got all your employees listed. You can drill into each individual employee. You can go in and enter things manually here as well and make any adjustments that you might need to make. And then once you have either done the batch entry or the individual entry, you create your paychecks. And make sure these payroll dates should roll automatically if it's set correctly. Your bank account should be set to the payroll account, but those are things that you want to double check before you go printing payroll. If you are loading check stock into the printer for your payroll account and you inadvertently have this operating account window visible here, you are going to basically be physically writing checks out of one account but you're going to be recording it as having come out of a different account, and it's only a matter of time before that ends really badly and checks start bouncing. And so again, this is just the individual employee window where you can go in and you can make adjustments. And if you don't have the payroll program, this is where you have no choice and you have to manually go in and enter these tax amounts, because there's no way for this to be calculated other than having the IRS Circular E sitting next to you, which is the tax table, and your calculator, and you are calculating the correct withholding. And you can print your paychecks on check stock, or you can handwrite and assign the check numbers. And I think that any company that's operating professionally ought to be beyond the point where they are manually writing checks for payroll. That really is a standard of professionalism that would fall below really any industry standard. And certainly your tax forms should all be computer generated and not handwritten. If you create a mistake on your paycheck, there are a couple of options, and the answer to what you do depends on when you discover the mistake. If you do that, if you find the mistake before you have created the check, then you can just go in and fix it in the employee's screen there, right here. If, however, you've already created the paychecks, you can't go back in here and fix it. The only thing you can do is go into the bank account itself and into the check register. You can edit the check and fix whatever it is that's incorrect about that. And then if you haven't printed the check, you can just print it at that point. If you've already printed the check, then you will need to basically void the check that you printed and print a new check. And that was just the really... And I will say, if you go into the edit window for that particular paycheck, it will take you to an editable employee screen just as the one that you had entered originally. So, and so I'm not actually going to walk through the how to pay employees. It's pretty basic, but because I don't have any data in here, it will not. But when you reach the end of your quarter, or however often you need to actually remit your payroll taxes to the taxing authority, QuickBooks will calculate that amount for you. And so that I will go over and show you. So under employees, it has payroll taxes and liabilities, pay payroll liabilities. We can put in a date range here. I'm not going to have anything, but if I did, it would, if there were liabilities here, I could then click what I wanted to pay. And so note that we also have to make sure that we are defaulting to the correct account and that we're not paying liabilities out of our operating account when in fact we've got the money in our payroll account. So that's something to always pay attention to, is to make sure that you are writing the checks through the correct account, and that B, it's the same account as the physical check stock that you've taken out of the drawer and stuck in the printer. Speaking from experience, having made that mistake. And again, just like many of the other things that we've paid, once you check them off, and we will have indicated which taxing authority is the vendor for that particular tax item when we set it all up, those things will all be taken care of. And so if it's any of our federal taxes, it's going to go to the United States Treasury as the vendor. And if it is the state, you know, whether it's state tax or unemployment or whatever, we'll have to go to the proper taxing authority for that. And so this is what the liability check would look like if we were just paying the federal stuff. So remember, when you're going through and you're checking these, don't get crazy. Make sure if you are intending to pay the federal obligations that the only things you check are the obligations you really intend to be remitting, and don't inadvertently click some state stuff, because that will not end well. And so here is the basically like the check stub that shows all of the different items that are going to be remitted. And QuickBooks will allow you to do that electronically, and so you can set that up separately. Regardless of how often you actually have to pay the tax, you still have to file your quarterly payroll returns and your annual returns. And so 941s are filed quarterly, W-2s and 940s are filed annually. And if you go ahead and spend the money on the enhanced payroll service, those tax forms are all created for you within QuickBooks. They come right out of your printer, able to be uploaded. They will even electronically file the federal ones if they're able to do that. Don't think they have a capability of working with the states to do electronic filing of state returns. But I still do mine the old-fashioned way in terms of state stuff. But at least federally, you can electronically file your state tax forms. and then keep copies for yourself. You can create management reports based on your payroll. You have overtime reports, things like that that are particularly helpful. And you can print a payroll liability balance report so that you know what your liabilities are for the various tax obligations, your individual transaction details. So this could be for a particular pay date, and what was the basically the report of your entire payroll for that pay period. Your state tax detail report, and this has been particularly helpful for me because in Vermont we have basically exemptions in terms of we have healthcare contributions that employers also have to make when the employers are not providing healthcare to their employees. And so it's for me being a single person here, it's a hassle but I still have to do it. And so QuickBooks does a really nice report so that I can fill out that portion that calculates what my, whether or not I have met the exemption, which as a single person, I always do. And again, these are just your payroll reports. And so that, for the most part, concludes the lecture portion. You will have some work to do this week also related to some advanced payroll functions from the appendices in your book, tracking things like sick leave and vacation time and things like that. And so I look forward to seeing your work.